On our season finale of Pens Pulse, presented by S&T Bank, the broadcast voices of the Pens take center stage. We look into the various play-by-play announcers throughout the history of the franchise.
I distinctly remember being at the Igloo, maybe the B level, and nudging my brother, like, that's where Mike Lang sits. This is when the game is going on.
We go between the benches to look into the various color analysts for the Penguins.
My dad, the Don of Peterborough, Don Airy, he worked the morning show, and I guess it was in my blood right away.
And finally, the broadcasters come together as Josh Getzoff is joined by Steve Mears and Colby Armstrong of AT&T Sports Network to reflect on the Penguins' regular season.
It goes back to what Coach Sullivan always talks about, his leadership group. His group knows what it takes, and then they're showing it as well as we get down into March and in April to playoffs.
From PPG Paints Arena, this is Pens Pulse. This portion of Pens Pulse is presented by your Western PA Honda dealers.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Pens Pulse presented by S&T Bank. I'm Selena Pompiani. We're up here on the media level at PPG Paints Arena, and it's from here that the various voices of the Penguins bring the game to life. Their passion and enthusiasm in describing the game for TV and radio is what the fans get to enjoy when away from the rink.
I'm Ed Conway, broadcaster for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
The first spokesman for the Penguins, if you will, was Ed Conway. But I remember Bill Hamilton really being the first play-by-play voice of the team. Eventually, though, the rights went to KDKA Radio. That was a big deal. And Jim Forney was the new announcer of the Penguins, and he was good.
I, along with hundreds of other people, applied. I sent a tape of my Hershey game, and I knew I got down to the final three. I heard later on that Dick Stockton listened to 3 tapes without question. That's the guy you want. So thank you, Dick Stockton, if you're I think what people that listened to the games heard was my unabashed love of the game and enthusiasm. You can't believe this. You got to see this, you know.
Alexei has plenty open. His shot scores! Shot credible! That's what hockey's all about.
Forney would call Penguins games for 3 seasons until he was replaced by California Golden Seals broadcaster Joe Starkey. 1 year later, in 1974, yet another play-by-play announcer arrived in Pittsburgh, this time from the Phoenix Roadrunners. 45 years later, he hasn't left.
We are just underway. We played the first minute here at the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh. 2-on-2. But Burroughs coming back. Quick shot! Scored! John Pornova drills it by. Hughes Malone from long range. 45-footer. Great balls of fire.
I was scared to death, to be honest with you, because you're going to KDKA, which is the first radio station ever. 50,000 watt clear channel, 38 states, all of Canada. All these people are going to be listening, and you're going to go there. But you know what happened? When I first got into it and started doing the games, it wasn't any different than what I had done in Phoenix and San Diego.
In the early 70s, all the way up through, I'd say, the mid-80s, teams like Pittsburgh were only televising a handful of games.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first telecast ever from west of the Mississippi. I'm Sam Nover, delighted to have you with us.
Sam Nover did about 6 to 8 games a year on the television side when I was doing radio on Channel 11. This is the co-patriot, which was Jack Riley, the former Penguins GM. Sam used to carry a little box. He would carry a box that he would be able to stand on to be taller. So whenever he was doing a broadcast, he'd wheel that baby in.
Sam Nover wasn't the only broadcaster to call games on television. For 1 season, a familiar voice from another sport began calling Penguins games.
How does that slide off the stick of Pronovo and company? See what happens when you light up the lights on Broadway?
Bob Prince probably was the greatest influence on me here in Pittsburgh of anybody. He told me, Laddie, you gotta go out and you gotta see the people. You gotta go see them. And sure enough, I did it for about 5 years. I would just take off in the summer and just drive somewhere 30, 40, 50, 100 miles away and just pull in and start talking hockey with people.
It's a hockey night in Pittsburgh. Tonight from the Civic Arena, the Penguins meet the New York Islanders.
Knocked off his skates by Northside. Lemieux's in on goal and shot. Hey! Shoots and scores! Mario Lemieux beats Casey like a rented mule again. Oh, you'd have to be here to believe it.
It's a hockey night in Pittsburgh. It's a hockey night in Pittsburgh.
The beauty of broadcasting and being around professional sports, no matter what sport it is the fact that every game is different. There are similarities, but there are not any games that are all the same. But most games are going to have moments during the course of it that'll be special, and that's kind of why I do use the goal calls.
Lang was recognized as one of the best in his profession when he received the Foster Hewitt Award from the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2001.
I was overwhelmed by it, and I still am to this day. And I'm appreciative of what people think that you can do a pretty decent job of bringing hockey to a Californian who didn't know hockey until he was 20 years old.
For over a decade, Penguins games were simulcast on TV and radio until the Penguins declared bankruptcy in the late 90s.
KBL got the rights to TV and radio and decided to split the broadcast, so no more simulcasts. That opened up an opportunity for a second play-by-play man. My first opportunity to do play-by-play was in '99 when the Penguins came out of bankruptcy. I always wanted to do it. I had a tabletop game that I bought after seeing an ad for it in the Penguins program. It was called Mr. Hockey. My friends and I played it every day, and my brother and I would play it. My brother wasn't very good. He didn't play it as much as me and my friends, so I would slow the game down to a pace where I could call it.
Recchi down the wing to Crosby in front, he scores! What a goal by Sidney Crosby! Absolutely off the charts!
When I got into the booth, Dan Potash said that Bob Airy and I sounded like two guys in a bar watching a game together when we called the games. And I thought that was a compliment, because that's how I wanted it to sound, like one-on-one communication to the viewer at home.
In 2017, it was announced that Josh Getzoff would fill in for Lang on select away games. The Hall of Fame broadcaster made sure to pass along the same advice that he received when he arrived in Pittsburgh.
The gunner, Bob Prince, had told me, you know, you got to give the score. You got to give the score, laddie. He'd always say, laddie, you always got to give the score. He said, but this is how I do it. You know, he gave me an 8-timer, and he said, you turn it over every 3 minutes, no matter what it is. Be sure you give the score. And I use that a lot, and I have to remind myself at times. I even have an 8-timer in my bag right now. I passed it along, and his eyes were wide open when he got it, and it made me smile like a butcher's dog. It really did.
That same year, Steve Mears made his debut on AT&T Sportsnet. Growing up in the Pittsburgh area, Mears practiced calling games the way most would if they weren't at a hockey rink.
I want to talk about getting used to the flow of calling a hockey game. It was video games. It was playing PlayStation, and no sound on the PlayStation game, sitting there with a controller, either with my brothers or by myself, and actually announcing the game as it happened. And those games are pretty fast.
Jake Guentzel battles to get possession toward the net. Back at him. He scores! Unbelievable! In overtime, Jake Guentzel. The Penguins win it 3-2.
Now calling games for the team he grew up watching, Mears gets to work alongside his childhood idol.
I'm more thankful of the friendship that I can text him and I can call him at any point. Great to talk to about either broadcasting or hockey or life in general. I distinctly remember being at the Igloo, maybe the B level, and nudging my brother. It's like, there he is. That's the booth right there. No, not that one with the big lights. That's where Mike Lang sits. This is when the game is going on.
And just as he was inspired by Mike Lang to pursue a career in broadcasting, Mears is doing the same by inspiring the next generation of broadcasters.
This year we started a program, it's called Future Voices of the Booth. It's for students of any age that want to come to a game, that are interested in broadcasting and a career in broadcasting, or really in sports media of any kind. And I've told this to so many of these students and other students in years past. I'm just a fan, I'm just a Penguin fan from Murraysville. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. And any dream is attainable.
Coming up next on Pens Pulse.
I thought because I played so long as a player, oh, I'll be fine. Oh, I'll be a good broadcaster. I know the game. I come to find out I needed to work a lot harder.
This portion of Pens Pulse is brought to you by Kent State University.
Welcome back to Pens Pulse, presented by S&T Bank. I'm Paul Steigerwald. This is a great place for the color analyst to get as close to the action as possible and give the viewer a unique perspective on the game. And while the play-by-play man has a bird's eye view from way up there, his job is to call the play. The color analyst detects the finer points of the game and uses replay to explain why and how a play developed. Josh Getzoff has more.
Whenever a player was injured, they used to be the color man for me because it was a one-man show back then. It was just one person. It wasn't a play-by-play and color and so on.
As the need for a color analyst became more apparent in broadcasts, teams such as the Penguins would use employees from the front office to fill the role.
Terry Schiffauer was the PR director of the hockey club. He worked with me on the television side, and probably more from necessity than anything else because he was the PR director and had his hands full with everything.
After being a color analyst for nearly a decade, another employee from the Penguins front office would end up replacing Schiffauer at the start of the 1984 season.
Terry Schiffauer had a son who played baseball, and he wanted to spend more time with him. So he basically said, "You take the TV job." So I succeeded a guy who never played, and of course I never played. So we were sort of the last of a dying breed of announcers who didn't actually play the sport.
Picked up by Lemieux, he grabbed it, reached way back for that puck and whipped it into the net past Peters, who couldn't have expected him to be shooting from that awkward position.
Well, back in the day, when I was working with Mike Lang for 15 years, it was a different era. A lot of people didn't know hockey back then. You know, we were bringing the game to people on television that most people in Pittsburgh really weren't all that familiar with.
With the Pens emerging from bankruptcy in 1999 and the end of simulcast, Paul Staggerwald would call Penguins games for radio. A familiar face would make his television debut alongside Mike Lang.
I don't think there's anybody that's worn the three hats that I've worn as a player, as a coach, and as a broadcaster on the TV side.
Lemieux throws it in front. He brings three guys here, right back to Lemieux. It's a 2-on-0. Lemieux and Jágr. Hermé's got no shot.
Olczyk wasn't the only former Penguin to join the broadcast team. On the radio side, 1991 and 92 Stanley Cup champion Bob Airey would be in the booth with Paul Staggerwald. It was a natural fit considering Airey came from a family of broadcasters.
My dad, the Don of Peterborough, Don Airey, he worked the morning show, and I guess it was in my blood right away. When you're a hockey player and you're interviewed all the time, I think it gives you a little bit of an idea of how to present yourself in front of the camera.
Despite Airey's family history with broadcasting, the former left winger was unsure about his future as his playing career was winding down.
I had rented a U-Haul. I was going to go back to Dallas where I built a home. We wanted to take the year to determine if that's exactly what we wanted to do. Did we want to call radio? Is this something that I could do, number one, that they were pleased with, number two, and that my wife could live with.
Since joining the Penguins broadcast team, Airey has provided a unique perspective and insight into the game as only a former player could.
Boyle in on goal. Where's the puck? It's in the net. He scores. The Rangers win.
Saw the double hit. Teams were off the ice. I said, wait a second, we don't want to get off the air here.
But from my side, it looked like it went off the post, and he double hit it. We got to replay this, guys. Hey, this I don't think this game should be over. He double hit this puck. You got to take that back. That's not a goal.
That didn't look right, that double hit. So if it doesn't look right, let's take a second look at it and let's get it right.
Bob Airey, to me, is a master at seeing the finer points of the game. I call him Eagle Eye Airey because he can see things that most people just don't see.
In 2003, another former Penguin would begin his second career in the Penguins broadcast booth.
After 18 years of playing professionally, I thought I had made enough connections where I could segue right into another job. That turned into 3 years. It was actually Mario who gave me advice and said, first thing you need to do is move back to Pittsburgh.
Bourque joined the Penguins broadcast on the radio side after Airey moved from radio to TV. The old 2-9er found out that being a broadcaster was harder than it looks.
I thought because I played so long as a player, oh, I'll be fine. Oh, I'll be a good broadcaster. I know the game. I come to find out I needed to work a lot harder to be better.
He spent his time, and I mean he spent his time learning the craft. And he did it day by day by day. Through it all, he still sees the game on a real high level.
And I always sit to his right, no matter what building we're in. And I sit there and I think, man, I am so lucky to sit next to this guy. When he knows when to embrace the moment, and he knows this is the time to, I'm gonna bring it home right now. And he goes right from the bottom of the toes, and you could feel it kind of rush up through his body.
Up the left side to Gensel, got a chance, goes to Crosby. Hey! Shoots and scores!
That's signature Mike Lang, you know that's a special moment.
When Bourque isn't with Lang in the broadcast booth, he can be seen between the benches next to his former teammate.
Yeah, here we are, like, 20, 25 years later after playing together, and we still giggle and laugh at the same stupid stuff that we giggled and laughed about 25 years ago.
Broadcasting has evolved beyond just play-by-play and a color analyst. Finding the human interest stories beyond the rink, one man in particular embraces his role one bench interview at a time.
Fox Sports Net Pittsburgh was expanding their operation, I was told that I was going to cover the Pittsburgh Penguins starting with Sidney Crosby's rookie year, be their in-game reporter and try to find those human interest stories. 14 years later, I'm still doing it. I love the game as much as anyone, but I never played it. I've always been happy as a storyteller. Hockey players are unique. They have a lot of stories to tell. And so I think if I can kind of take that angle during the game and provide a little color, a little something different, it makes the broadcast more than just the game. It's also really a vehicle for entertainment as well.
Dan Potash has taken his obligation to entertain to new extremes, wearing elaborate costumes during Penguin theme nights.
My executive producer said, if you want to get involved with this, please do. And I kind of looked at him and said, is there a limit to what I could do? And he smiled and said, no, but we want you to have fun with it. Is that just another example of this team taking another step? I got him, finally! Again, it's part of the entertainment side of the game. It's been so enjoyable, and I think it probably has gone off much better than I thought.
Coming up next on Pens Pulse.
To me, he's without a doubt one of the greatest players in the history of this sport. 88th player in NHL history to record 1,000 points.
This portion of Pens Pulse is brought to you by Passavant Memorial Homes Family of Services.
Welcome back into Pens Pulse, presented by S&T Bank. I'm Josh Getzoff, and it's time now for some more roundtable conversation action. We have Steve Mears of AT&T Sportsnet, the voice of the Penguins on AT&T Sportsnet, and Colby Armstrong of AT&T Sportsnet, Penguins Radio Network, Sportsnet Canada. He's all over the place. Happy to have him here. Guys, this season, it's almost over. It's been a wild one. But when you look at this year, milestones seem to be at the forefront as far as the theme of the year. We had Matt Cullen, Phil Kessel, Chris Letang, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin. I probably missed one in there as well. But they were all across the board, and it's definitely a theme of the year, Army.
Well, you're just naming all the old guys. I think that's pretty rare nowadays in today's game, where you see a lot of guys get moved around a lot, but these marquee guys that the Penguins have been able to have, you know, right from Mario Jágr now to Malkin Crosby. It's been pretty cool to see that. But I think with the milestones, guys, comes age and comes with the territory. And I think we see that with the group, especially with Matt Cullen's 1,500 game mark. The 42-year-old keeps going.
They're all special. I mean, they're all significant milestones, especially this year with this Penguin season. For me, 1,000 points, that's a big one, right? 1,000, you think of the benchmark milestones, 1,000 points, 500 goals, 1,000 games. And for Evgeny Malkin to hit 1,000 points and also to get some well-deserved recognition that he probably hasn't gotten over the years, to me, he's without a doubt one of the greatest players in the history of this sport, and 88th player in NHL history to record 1,000 points. That's a significant milestone for me. And that moment, to get that assist, to see the way that the crowd reacted and his teammates reacted, and then the subsequent celebration in the next home game, I thought it was really special.
And his parents. I thought that was cool. Yeah, you know, since day one, it's been his mom and dad here and supporting him and his family, and now obviously his son in the picture.
Well, as we sit here now, there's a lot of conversation about the future for the Penguins. Home ice potentially in the first round is a possibility, and it's hard to believe that we probably wouldn't have been saying that 2 months ago with this team, with how much has changed. You think back to the trades Jim Rutherford has made this year. Obviously, Marcus Pettersson, one of the first big moves to come back on board here in Pittsburgh. At the deadline, we got Erica Branson, but in between, in the beginning of February, there was a trade with the Florida Panthers that brought Nick Bjugstad and Jared McCann to Pittsburgh. And when you look at how things have changed since that trade, it's pretty remarkable with how much that trade has helped this team.
Yeah, it has. And I think, looking at that trade and that deal, the first thing you think of is youth. You got younger, and you got guys that I think they thought would fit this style of play and their game style a lot better here with what they were able to do. And the big talk I felt was of Bjugstad. He comes in with this 6'5". Was he 6'5"? Guy that can skate, and is centerman. He can play wing, and I think we've seen them both contribute in different ways. But obviously, I think a lot of people after that now have been a lot more excited now, possibly about Jared McCann and what he's been able to do, scoring some big goals up and down the lineup, able to play wing and center as well on the top line with Crosby for a while, which really got his wheels turning offensively.
Every single move, and this was the case here, trading a couple of older players and getting Jared McCann, youngest player on the team, 22 years of age. We forget about that, but you think of him as more of a veteran because he's been in the league since he was 18 years old with Vancouver. 4th year already in the NHL. And then Nick Bjugstad, by no means old either. So I think that's been a key to get younger. The moves by Jim Rutherford, this is a young man's game. You got to be able to skate, and you got to have some youth in your lineup.
bottom line, they're a better team since these trades have been made, and this record, the results kind of speak to that. So guys, as we come down the stretch here, you look at the opportunity for the Penguins. Again, something as we said earlier, that 2 months ago, we did not know if we'd be talking about, but here we are, at the very least, a chance to get home ice in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I know it's a little too much to ask for a prediction, but when you think about the options for this team, I mean, there's certainly a lot of optimism, and dare I say, it almost feels like years past in recent seasons with how they're playing down the stretch here into the postseason.
Exactly. I was going to say the same thing, and there are a couple of reasons why. Hitting their stride at this time, where you can't flip the switch. We always hear that cliche. To see the Penguins hitting their stride at the right time, very similar to past years where they've had a lot of success. And the other one is contributions from younger players. Teddy Bluger scoring some big goals here. I just talked about some of the deals and young players from the trades coming in. Adam Johnson gets a call up, and we're seeing his speed brought to the lineup here lately. So those two categories and characteristics, I think, are really reminiscent of what we've seen in the past.
But it goes back to, the milestones that we talked about, those players that accomplished that. It goes back to what Coach Sullivan always talks about, his leadership group, and knowing they're battle tested and this group knows what it takes. And then they're showing it as well as we get down into March and in April to playoffs. I think that calming factor of them knowing where they have to get to at the right time of the year, I think you really got to hand it to the leadership group and knowing, kind of timing-wise, feel-wise, importance-wise of when to get it done.
Mike Sullivan always talks about the process throughout the regular season. We're almost at the end of the process. Now it's time to see some results for the Pens. Stanley Cup playoffs on the horizon, and we thank everyone out there for tuning in. For Steve Mears and Colby Armstrong, and of course Paul Steigerwald and Selena Pompiani, I'm Josh Getzoff. Thanks for watching Pens Pulse. We'll catch you next time.
This goalie is way better than the bubble hockey goalie because he moves. You can actually cut the angle off. There we go, a little power there. Where's the rocket? Oh, that hasn't been done in 90 years of this game. That's the first time that's ever happened.